Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is a pro-revenge story. So about 3 years ago, I'm selling a used car. Check engine light was on, the AC needed recharging, and the fuel pump or something was out. I go to my local trusted sales site. Ad goes up with a few pictures and the words, "I work odd hours, so I may not be able to accept a phone call. Please only text me." Yay to working swings and midnights, right? Actually, it was for online classes, but same difference for me. A few days in, I get a pretty standard text. "Hey, I'm Alex. Is your car still available?" Alex isn't his real name, but you get the idea. I text back that it is. We exchange a few standard texts about price, why the check engine light is on, who gave me the quote, I listed an approximate price on the repairs as quoted from my trusted mechanic, and whatnot. The next day I get a text from him saying, "Are you gonna clear out all your crap from the car before you sell it to me, or is that my job?" Unwarranted hostility? Seriously? What the heck, dude? He's not the only interested party, so I text him back, "I'm not selling the car to you, so don't worry about it." I never said I would sell it to him. He never asked if he was the only interested party, and others were already arranging test drives. I didn't need him and his less than full price partial commitment, and the crap he was complaining about is 3 textbooks and a bag I keep clothes in. 4 things. This guy didn't like to take no for an answer and starts calling and texting about how my car's paint is peeling, true, but the pics and description said so, and how dare I ask so much, $1,500 for a piece of junk car. I reply, "Look, Alex, I've told you multiple times that the car isn't for sale to you. I have other interested buyers. Please stop contacting me." He fires back, "You can't do this to me. I need that car." I respond, "I'm sorry, but that's my final decision. Please respect that." Then things got personal. This site gave you the option to link to Facebook so you could post at both places at the same time. So I had. I didn't have my privacy settings locked down as it was still relatively early in Facebook's reign, and I actually trusted them at the time. Silly me, I know. I hadn't anticipated that he would be able to find my info through the website's post, and find my name, my location, pictures of my kid, my father-in-law's obit, etc. Surprise me, he did. He starts texting me about how I should be ashamed of myself for saying no to him, a muscular dude, and me being a quite round female. He included a picture in one text, and he wasn't the muscular-built man he claimed to be. He looked like a beanpole with 2 AB muscles, so what the heck, dude? He asked me if I even knew everything about cars, or if I made the post while on my period so I didn't know what I was talking about. He texted that I should be lucky I was already married, or else he would come to my house and show me how a real man handles a little witch. He got close but didn't have an address, and the way my address pulls up on GPS, he never would find my apartment. Thankfully. Small side info. Since I was taking online classes at the time and needed a more flexible schedule, I worked as a school crossing guard. Every 2 weeks or so, we'd go in to sign our time cards to get paid. This crossing guard gig was a hire through my local PD. Not all crossing guard gigs are the same, but this one was. During one of these visits to the office, I was using my phone while waiting for my boss to get to me, my name being low in the alphabet. I hadn't yet blocked the dude as it hadn't been long since this started, and I was hoping it would fizzle out on its own. I didn't check my phone during my online classes, choosing to turn it off to avoid getting distracted by it the entire day, and I was often flooded with several hours of texts all at once. What I saw on my phone drove me over the edge. He started texting about pictures I had posted on Facebook of my 8 or 7-year-old son. He had just majorly crossed the line. The cleanest version of his texts included things like, "Your kid is just as ugly as you are. I hope you don't plan on him leaving home to get a wife anytime soon." And how a smudge of dirt on his face from a day at the zoo looked like I beat him. "I didn't sell you a car and you're taking out your rage by threatening to assault me and accusing me of beating my kid?" Oh, hell no! Apparently I was loud when I said what I did because my boss Sarah stepped right over to me next and asked, "Is everything okay? You look upset." Great person. 10/10. Would boss again. I told her that I was getting these abusive texts from a random guy who tried to buy my car. I told her I was about to erase the text and block him, but she's like, "No, wait, don't do that. Let me see your phone." So happy I didn't delete them because this next part still makes my heart sore. I offer and she takes my phone, reading all the sick and vile things he texted to me. She tells me to wait until she's cleared the lobby of the other crossing guards, so I do. She then tells me to follow her behind the security doors at the PD station, still having my phone. I don't know what's happening, but I liked and trusted her, so I do. I follow her back to her office where she works on her computer, referring to my phone on occasion. She asks if all I have is the phone number or if I got his name too. I tell her I only got a first name and scroll to the text where he introduced himself. An uncomfortable amount of time later, she hands back my phone. Something to mention, Sarah isn't just administrative, I didn't know it at the time, but she's a full-on lieutenant in the local PD. She came up the ranks from patrol, moving to a position where she exclusively investigated child, elder, disabled abuse complaints before moving into her current desk position. Needless to say, she didn't take people threatening harm to kids lightly. Because I hadn't blocked the number, I still had the text messages with the dude's name, and she had used it to cross-search him and the phone number. Long story short, she knew exactly who he was. She says not to worry, but don't delete or respond to his texts anymore. She had it. If it got worse, I should call her or cop as appropriate right away. Unconcerned and happy she had the situation in hand, I leave and go back to my online class. When I'm back to the office to sign my next time card 2 weeks later, I had several unread texts from the guy. I had filtered them so I didn't see them pop up and hadn't read them. I had sold the car for full asking price and all but forgotten the entire situation. Sarah tells me to wait for her again as she had something else for me to sign, and I again return to her office. She briefly explains what she had for me was an actionable complaint that she needed me to sign from my issue 2 weeks ago. I remember everything all over again. She must see my face because she tells me not to worry and that she can tell me what's going on more after I actually sign the form. So I do. Dear reader, this is the best situation anyone could have asked for. The phone number tied to many people as the provider was known for cheap cell service for those that were desperate for a way to contact people, services, employment. But with the name Alex, again, fake name, she was able to find out who was messing with me. She then got a driver's license, which led to an address, which led to a police report for possible domestic violence. Fall down the rabbit hole some more, and you find out that this dude had 5 kids by 4 women, and he was in arrears on his child support to them all. Hadn't been paying for 5+ years, and it was in the neighborhood of 40-60K, if memory serves. But he somehow, just 2 weeks ago, requested a title transfer for a new-to-him, quite fancy old car. I don't remember the kind, but think high-end car show and massive insurance premiums. Being so far in arrears meant that Sarah was able to place a seizure order on the car so it could be sold to pay back the child support. One of the baby mamas lived in a state where fleeing child support meant you could have a warrant issued for your arrest. When she called the interested parties in that state to see if they wanted her to execute the arrest warrant, they said yes, with much haste. That was a funny turn of phrase, so I always remembered it. One conversation later, and Sarah was able to determine that he was using his brother's social security number on his employment forms to avoid child support garnishments. This is all sorts of illegal, so she notified the guy's HR department so it could be corrected. They informed her he would be fired for fraudulently submitting false documents. Sarah then told me, about 4 days ago, I executed the warrant on Alex for felony child abandonment, and the state he was to be held for is already en route to pick him up. It carries an 8-12-year sentence, and he still has to pay his back child support. I could have dealt with the comments, I could have dealt with the not taking no for an answer, even dealt with the cyber stalking a little. But when your twisted mind okays you to bring my kid into the picture, you've crossed the line. If you would have stopped at no, you wouldn't be in jail right now. The next one is an entitled people story. Let me tell you about the time I almost lost my cool over a stupid grill. Yeah, you heard that right, a grill. It all started when I moved into my new place last summer. Nice little house, decent yard, friendly enough neighbors. Or so I thought. I'd barely finished unpacking when there was a knock at my door. Standing there with a plastered-on smile was Karen from 2 doors down. She introduced herself as the president of the Neighborhood Homeowners Association and handed me a thick packet of rules and bylaws. "Welcome to the neighborhood," she chirped. "Just make sure you read through all of this and sign the last page to join our homeowner association. We have monthly meetings and dues are $50. I flipped through the packet, eyebrows raised at some of the nitpicky rules. No parking on the street overnight, only certain approved paint colors. Yeah, no thanks. "Actually, I'm not interested in joining," I said, handing the packet back. "But thanks anyway." Karen's smile tightened. "Oh, well, all homeowners are required to be members. It's for the good of the neighborhood." "Sorry, but that's not true," I replied. I checked before buying, and this isn't a mandatory homeowner association. My realtor confirmed it. There must be some mistake, Karen insisted. I'll have to look into this. In the meantime, please follow our rules to keep things consistent. I shrugged. I'll be a good neighbor, but I'm not bound by homeowner association rules. Have a nice day. And I shut the door before she could argue further. I figured that was the end of it. Boy, was I wrong. A few weeks later, I invited some buddies over to watch the game and grill out on my back patio. We were having a great time, tossing back a few beers and flipping burgers when I heard an angry voice from over the fence. "Excuse me, you need to stop that immediately." I looked over to see Karen glaring at us, hands on her hips. "Stop what?" I asked. "That grill! It's a violation of homeowner association rules. No grilling on patios or decks." I sighed, already tired of this nonsense. "Karen, we've been over this. I'm not in your homeowner association. This is my property and I can grill if I want to." "It's a fire hazard," she shrieked, "and the smell is bothering the neighbors. You have 5 minutes to put it out or I'm calling the authorities." My friends looked uncomfortable, but I wasn't about to let Karen ruin our cookout. "Go ahead and call," I said calmly. "I'm not doing anything illegal." She stormed off in a huff. We went back to our burgers, laughing about how ridiculous she was being. About 20 minutes later, a police car pulled up out front. I went out to meet the officer, explaining the situation before he even asked. He seemed annoyed at being called out for something so trivial. "Sir, you're well within your rights to grill on your own property," he told me. "There's no law against it. Just be mindful of smoke and keep a fire extinguisher handy." I nodded. "Of course, officer. I always grill safely." He turned to Karen, who was hovering nearby. "Ma'am, please don't call us for non-emergency homeowner association disputes. This gentleman isn't violating any laws or ordinances." Karen spluttered indignantly as the officer left. She shot me a venomous look before storming back to her house. I thought that would be the end of it. But Karen was relentless. Over the next few weeks, she tried everything to force me to join the homeowner association and follow their rules. She left nasty notes on my door. She rallied other neighbors to pressure me. She even tried to claim my house was technically part of the homeowner association because the previous owners were members. It all came to a head one Saturday afternoon. I was in my front yard chatting with my next-door neighbor, Jim, when Karen marched up with a smug look on her face. "I hope you're happy," she sneered. "Your stubbornness is costing everyone. Our insurance rates are going up because you refuse to follow homeowner association safety guidelines." I rolled my eyes. "Karen, for the 100th time, I'm not in your homeowner association. Your insurance has nothing to do with me." "Wrong!" she crowed, waving a piece of paper. "I have proof that your property is included in our homeowner association jurisdiction. You'll be hearing from our lawyer." Jim and I exchanged bemused looks as Karen flounced away. "You better watch out," Jim chuckled. "She means business this time." I shrugged. "Let her try. I know my rights." Sure enough, a few days later, I got a certified letter from some fancy law firm representing the homeowner association. They were demanding I cease all violations immediately and pay over $2,000 in fines and back dues. If I didn't comply within 10 days, they'd pursue legal action. Now, I'm a pretty laid-back guy, but this was the last straw. These people had harassed me for months over nothing. It was time to fight back. I called up my buddy Mike, who happened to be a real estate attorney. He looked over all the homeowner association documents and the threatening letter. "This is complete bull," he said. "They have no legal standing whatsoever. Want me to respond?" "Hell yes," I replied. "Let's shut this down once and for all." Mike sent a strongly worded letter to the homeowner association's lawyers, outlining exactly why their claims were baseless. He included copies of my property records proving I wasn't part of any homeowner association. He also threw in some pointed language about harassment and potential countersuit if they didn't back off. We didn't hear a peep for almost 2 weeks. Then one evening, there was a timid knock at my door. It was Karen, looking decidedly less smug than usual. "We, received the letter from your attorney," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "There seems to have been some confusion about the homeowner association boundaries. We'll be updating our records to show your property isn't included." I nodded. "I appreciate that, Karen. Anything else?" She hesitated. "The board wanted me to apologize for the misunderstanding. We hope there are no hard feelings." I could tell the apology was killing her, but I decided to be the bigger person. "Water under the bridge," I said. "I'm happy to be a good neighbor. I just don't want to be in an homeowner association. No offense." "Right. Well, have a nice evening." And with that, she scurried away. Word spread quickly through the neighborhood about Karen's humiliating defeat. A few other homeowners who'd been bullied into the homeowner association reached out to me for advice on how to get out. I was happy to help. These days, things are pretty quiet on our street. Karen still gives me the stink eye when I'm out grilling, but she doesn't dare say anything. And you know what? Those burgers taste even better now. The next one is a petty revenge story. The mow the lawn post reminded me of a story from my 20s. When my parents retired, they moved a few thousand kilometers away. The sale went well. Final walkthrough was supposed to be at 4 p.m. on whatever day. This was about 30 in the early 90s, so some things are a little vague. Growing up in the burbs, we never locked our doors. The days before the walkthrough, I helped my parents pack a few things, but the movers did most of the packing the day before. The only things left unpacked were my parents' bed, a couple of suitcases, etc., for their drive to their new place. 8 a.m. on the occupancy day, the buyer walks into my parents' home while they're getting ready to leave. My mother was in the shower, Dad was eating breakfast. Dad, a big guy, had confronted the guy and said he'd beat his ass if he didn't leave right now. The realtor was absolutely no help. Naturally, my parents freaked out and called me a bit later. So I did what any 22-year-old a-hole would. I removed every light fixture and left them on the living room floor. I had removed every light bulb and left them around the house, even a couple in the heat vents. I removed every switch plate and left them in the kitchen sink. The little screws they use were sprinkled around the house. I peeled off every sticker on the electrical breaker panel so you couldn't read which breaker fed which room. I took the TV antenna rotor. It's the thing that turned the TV antenna on the roof, allowing you to tune in different stations. It wasn't in the sale contract. I removed the dishwasher, turned off the water to it, and put it back in. I removed all the doorknobs and tossed them all into the crawl space. The buyer tried to back out, but when my dad said, "Go ahead, I'll call the police about you breaking and entering this morning," and technically nothing has been damaged or removed. Good luck with that. They got the check at 4 o'clock as scheduled from the notary. The next one is a malicious compliance story. This story was told to me by my friend Lucy. At the time, she lived in an army town and worked for many summers at a restaurant popular with the officers and their families. At this particular restaurant, which is on the higher end, there's a table reserved for high-ranking officers who visit the base. People who worked there referred to it as the table. On busier nights when there isn't a higher-ranking officer in town, it's utilized to seat more patrons, but for the most part, it's left alone. It's Friday, so it's busy. There is a general visiting the base, so the table isn't being used just in case he decided to grace the establishment with his presence. Lucy is manning her section when the owner, named John for the purposes of this story, waves her down. She heads over and he tells her, "I need you and Annie, another server, to help me man the table." "The general is coming?" she asked. "Nope, Brad is." Lucy rolled her eyes. Brad was a local bigwig's high school-age son, and he had it in his mind that he was a hotshot. He frequented the restaurant with his girl of the week and proceeded to make a nuisance of himself every time, but not enough to the point that he was asked to leave. Lucy asked John, "Are you sure? What if the general wants to eat dinner with us?" At this, John leaned in with a wide smile and said, "Apparently the general called and told us to give Brad the table and to give him and his guests anything he wanted." Lucy then smiled as she realized what was about to happen. Brad was about to get a serving of malicious compliance on the house. 20 minutes later, Brad, wearing a West Point blazer, arrives with several young people. John makes a big show of greeting them and escorting them to the table. The people look around impressed, and Brad proceeds to command Lucy, John, and Annie around like he owns the restaurant. The only good thing about this particular experience was that, due to him being underaged, Brad and his buddies never tried to order any alcohol. Brad proceeded to be a nuisance, demanding more appetizers, sending food back because it wasn't cooked just right, ordering the most expensive entrees on the menu, yada yada yada. Lucy, Annie, and John continue with this, smiling as more and more food is added to the table. It's time for the check. Lucy told me that the entire group managed to rack up $843.29, not counting the mandatory gratuity because the party is above a certain size. Brad gets the bill, and he flips out. "What is this?" he barked, waving the check. "It's your check," John said. "The general said to let you order anything you wanted." Brad stands up to argue, and that's when the host rushes up, her face white. "John, the general is here," she whispered. Everyone turns to look, and there's the general with his entourage. John excuses himself before going over. He and the general start to talk for a few minutes, and Lucy notices Brad turning white and starting to get out of his seat. Annie looked at him and said, "You better not try a dine and dash," she said. "I really don't want to have to sick these nice officers on you." Brad sat down and fidgeted. John and the general come back to the table. Making eye contact with Brad, John said, "Brad, you said the good general here insisted you have the table and that you can order anything you want. Is this true?" He only nodded. "Well, the general here said that he never made no such phone call." "That's odd," Brad said before looking at the general. "I'm pretty sure it was you I talked to. Sir?" "I have the phone number, let's call it," John said, pulling out his cell phone and dialing a number. That's when they hear Brad's brand new cell phone going off in his pocket. The general held his hand out and Brad puts the phone in his hand. He checks the number and asks John, "Is your number 123-456-789D?" "It is," John said. The general then proceeded to get a serious look on his face. "Brad, are you a cadet?" "I'm being considered for an appointment," Brad said. The general nodded. "I suggest you pay your bill, tip in full, and apologize to the staff for your behavior," he said to Brad. "I also suggest withdrawing your name as soon as possible to save yourself the embarrassment." Keeping his head down, Brad paid the bill, meekly apologized, and left with his sycophants. The general and his entourage patiently waited for the table to be cleared and set. They proceeded to have a nice meal, leaving a generous tip and apologizing for people like Brad. Lucy proceeded to have a wonderful Brad-free career. The next one is an entitled People's Story. Back in the early 2000s, I was the IT manager for a small company. In May of one year, I hired Robin, the first female in our department. She was a church friend of one of my team, and he recommended her. I made sure she met the other team member and gave them time without me present. I not only got his feedback, I made sure she had a good vibe from him before I hired her. Everyone got along and things were running smoothly for several months. The Friday before Thanksgiving, we had a company get-together and everyone's spouses came. That's when Robin met my husband. I left on Saturday for a 2-week vacation, and when I got back, my boss called me before I could even boot up my computer and asked me to come to his office. While I was gone, Robin accused me of sexual harassment. HR did their investigation and said they could find no evidence of it because it never happened, but offered to transfer her to another department and she declined. Then she said I was an incompetent manager. My style was to assign projects based on people's skills or interests, or let them decide among themselves who was going to do what if it wasn't specific. The other 2 people in the department loved the freedom and trust. Robin apparently did not. My boss said she couldn't point out any specific requests she made that I was unresponsive to, nor could she think of any time I singled her out or treated her differently. The fact I wasn't micromanaging her made me a bad manager in her eyes. My boss told her that might be new for her, but that was how he managed too, and he had never heard anyone complain about being trusted too much or given too much freedom. He suggested she tell me that she needed more oversight. She said she wasn't comfortable having that conversation, so he offered to do it for her. That's when she said she couldn't work with me because I am gay. My boss asked her if I said or did anything inappropriate, and she said no. In fact, prior to meeting my husband, she thought I was talking about a roommate when I referred to him. Homosexuality was against her religious beliefs, and she never would have taken the job had she known. My presence created a hostile work environment for her, so he had to fire me. She was also outraged that my boss dared to call himself a Christian and would accept someone so blatantly sinful. My boss told her to get over it or quit because he was not firing me over her religious beliefs. She quit. When I got back to my desk, the guy who recommended her said she started stirring stuff up at church, trying to get him thrown out of the congregation since he knew I was gay. He said the church had several lesbian and gay members and never said anything negative about homosexuality, so he was surprised at her stance. The preacher asked her not to come back. I was blown away by Robin's sense of entitlement. She thought her being an evangelical Christian meant she got to dictate who a company could hire or who could attend a church. I was thankful that everyone, my boss, HR, my team, even an unknown preacher, had my back. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.